So Chief, you make the call when you think it's time to start. If you believe that there are folks still making their way in, we can give them some
Angela,
more time, or we can just get going if you like.
Angela, have you joined?
I see Angela's name, but she's muted.
We just had council this morning, so she's having her lunch, but she'll join us momentarily. But I think we can get started. We'll start today with a prayer. And we will also remember our ancestors who oftentimes were at a great disadvantage because of language when these events were transacted that give rise to us having this discussion today. Sungwat ni hanagarun yage de shidra was another gondi saya netra on dawat. Jinunsre at yawn in a hunjage, chinonito nagarun yage. They'll give a good sarade, net sarade, unguanadra only. Don't go riosto. Neji worry one or legitimate Gary Stony Rowdy one or Uxrom. Ego is a solid Negaya Netra Nagasat Stontra, always on Genuhoi, Allah. So our Creator, we join our hearts and minds and spirits on this day, and we give you thanks for all that you provide for us in this life, for all the water that quenches our thirst, the food that satisfies our hunger and nourishes our bodies. We thank you for our community and for all of our people that are here that share this land. We ask you to always guide us with a good mind, a good spirit, and a good heart, so that the outcome of our discussions will be beneficial to this generation and all the future generations that are coming toward us. We are mindful to be thankful for this land that we live on, that we have a place to call our home, and for all of the bounty of creation that sustains us in this life. We ask you to be with us in our deliberations today and to receive the information with a good heart and a good mind. And we pray that the outcome will be one that will be best for our people. And for these blessings, we give you our thanks. Go up. So I am Chief R. Donald Miracle, the elected chief of the Mohawks of Bay of Quinte. And I'll introduce my counselors. Jordan, can you put the screen back on, or Lawrence, so they can see their faces? And I'll ask the counselors to turn your cameras on so people can see you. Okay,
I see somebody who looks like Ted, but he's much older.
Yeah, I'm Chief Don Miracle, the elected chief of the Mohawks Bay of Quinte. We have Councillor Ted Miracle. Do you want to just give them away there, Ted? We have Councillor Josh Hill on the line. We have Councillor Linda Lewine. We have the Angela Miracle, who's our Director of Operations, who's having her lunch. We have Lisa Miracle on our line, our Director of Community Services. Do you want to get them away there, Lisa? And David Sully, our Chief Administrative Officer, is at a medical appointment with a specialist today in Toronto, so he's unable to join us. And we have our legal counsel, Alan Pratt.
I'm also old too.
Okay, and we have the younger legal counsel, Jordan Sewell. And we have lawyer Douglas Buckmeyer from Gowlings Law Office. We have a lawyer, Alyssa Flaherty Spence from Gowlings Law Firm. And they're both the trustee agreement. We have our financial advisor from the Bank of Montreal, BMO Nesbitt Burns, Mark McDonald. Mark. We have our land acquisition trustee, Steve Partridge. And we have our ratification officer from One Feather, Lawrence Lewis. And I think I've got everybody that I need to introduce. Is there anybody that I've forgotten as part of our team? Okay, thank you very much. So on behalf of the council, I thank everyone who's joined the call today and they listen to the presentations from our team. The Culbertson claim goes back into 1837 when some land was taken from our reserve and given a patent deed without a surrender of our people. Some 694 4.3 acres of land was taken from our people without a surrender. After 17 years, so we filed a claim in 1995 with both Ontario, the Attorney General of Ontario, and the Minister of Indian Affairs at the time. So after 17 years of negotiations, the council and I are pleased, and our staff are pleased to announce the upcoming ratification of a vote to partially settle part of this land claim. The Chief and Council supports the partial settlement and recommends that our members ratify it. It will see the return of approximately 300 acres of unsurrendered land to the control and administration of the Mohawks Bay of Quinte for active use and control of MBQ. It provides a reasonable amount of cash, some $31 million in compensation for the loss of use, and it does not require a surrender of any land, and it's done on a without prejudice basis to discussions on the balance of the claim that has yet to be negotiated. And so it doesn't affect any discussions for the future return of any Culbertson tract land claims. So I'm going to turn it over now to Alan, Pratt, Jordan, Sewell, Alyssa, Douglas, Steve, and Mark, and Lawrence to make their presentations. So Alan and Jordan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Just on a personal introductory note, I have been involved as the legal advisor. Can you make this full screen and do it as a slideshow, please, Jordan? Thank you. Since the beginning, not since the beginning of the research into the claim, but I was involved back in the early 90s in the drafting of the claim submission, and have been through all of the very frustrating steps. This is the first of a series of 6 information sessions planned prior to the vote on September 25. We're going to be hearing from, you can see from those of you who can see the screen, you can see the logos for the MBQ logo, my firm logo, Gowling, our WLG, which is the firm who have put together our Land Acquisition Trust, and BMO Wealth Management, who will be acting as trustee and investment advisor. We all have some slides in this presentation, and we'll go back and forth in time. It is a great honor to be, and a relief, I'd say, after so many years of work, to have this partial success. And I will be doing the first 11 slides. My colleague Jordan Sewell will do a number of slides, and we'll go back and forth so we avoid you hearing too much of the same boring voice droning on for too long. So next slide, please. Jordan, next slide, please. So we're going to cover the history of the claim, the negotiations and why it took so long, the offer, the agreement, and the Land Acquisition Trust. So that's a short agenda. Next, please. So the Culbertson Tract, you may be wondering, the Culbertson Tract is the land that's in blue. You can see on the left side of the slide where the territory is. And so the southern end of it is in the the eastern portion of the town of Deseronto. The northern portion is in the township of Tyendinaga. The whole area of blue of the whole Culbertson Tract is 923 acres. We had a study done a number of years ago on the claim, and we have that report from a surveying expert. 923 acres. The partial settlement claim land is cross-hatched in pink, and it's a portion of the Culbertson Tract that is currently owned in fee simple by a gentleman named Terry Kimmett, and we'll be talking about him later as we go along. And you can see from the insert where that map area is in relation to the territory as a whole, which is outlined in red. Okay, next, please. And here's the claim land without the balance of the Culbertson Tract shown. So this is what is coming back to the band. if we have a completed ratification agreement. It's rural land. Well, you know where it is. I think many of you who live in the area, it's got the quarry on it. There's a satellite image later in the presentation where you can have a better look at the land. Next, please. So if we go back in history a little bit, many of you will know the history and that the Mohawk people from the Fort Hunter in the Mohawk Valley remained loyal to the Crown during the American Revolutionary War. And as the British began to lose that war, the Mohawks, who were your ancestors, had to relocate, I believe, first to Lachine, Quebec, and then in 1784 to the Mohawk Landing on the Bay of Quinte. And in 1793, the Crown granted the Mohawk Tract. It was said in the document to the Six Nations, but it was really the portion of the Six Nations that was the Fort Hunter Mohawk community that had been loyal to the Crown. And the purpose of creating the Mohawk Tract in that deed or treaty, we call it a treaty, we believe it's a treaty in law, although Canada doesn't share that opinion. It was explicitly given to the Mohawks to recompense or compensate for losses sustained in the Revolutionary War as allies of the British. The British, of course, in 1783, signed a peace treaty with the United States that recognized the independence of the United States, and the Mohawk allies were left having to find a new homeland because they were or didn't feel welcome in their traditional homeland. So the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte today is the holder of all of the rights granted under the Simcoe deed. There's no real question about that. It's been treated that way for over 200 years. The Mohawk Tract was given special protection in the Simcoe deed. It provided that no sale or transfer of land by the Mohawks to anyone other than the Crown was null and void, and no sale by the Mohawks could take place without first a formal surrender of land to the Crown. And that next slide, I think, sets out the wording of the Simcoe deed on that. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the main point of this slide is that when the Mohawk people, chiefs, warriors, women, people, were inclined to dispose of and surrender, so it should have been instigated by the Mohawk people, then some public meeting or assembly of the chiefs, warriors, and people had to take place for the purpose of a surrender, which was going to be presided over by the governor, lieutenant governor, or person administering our government in our province of Upper Canada. So this is the so-called surrender process. It required not only the decision to dispose of land, but then a formal public assent given to that in a formal assembly. We don't know whether in 1793 there was a particular voting process, but it was really up to the custom of the Mohawk people as to how they would hold that assembly and consent to a surrender. And we know that the surrender process was known. It was used in 1820. There was a surrender of land in 1824. And we have researched that 1820 surrender number 24, and we have submitted a claim to the federal government because of the very serious irregularities in that surrender. So it's clear that in 1837, when the facts around the Culbertson Tract occurred, it was fresh in the minds of government and the Mohawk people how this surrender process would work. Next, please. So these are the facts of the Culbertson Tract itself. The Mohawk Captain John Deseronto, I'll call him John Deseronto, was one of the two I say one of the two great leaders of the Six Nations people. The other one being Joseph Brant, who led the settlement at the Grand River. So Captain John was I'd say the leader of the Mohawk people who settled at the Bay of Quinte. His grandson was called John Culbertson. Captain John had a farm, and when he passed away in 1811, he left his farmland, which we now call the Culbertson Tract, the 923 acres, to John Culbertson in his will. So John Culbertson was the owner of this land according to the internal Mohawk customs of land ownership within the territory, but it was still a reserve land. The government took the position early on that there was a quitclaim whereby 4 chiefs recognized John Culbertson's ownership and signed a quitclaim deed. And this was treated as if it was a surrender by the Upper Canada and imperial authorities, and it wasn't. It simply wasn't a surrender. It was an acknowledgement within the Mohawk landholding system that John Culbertson was the rightful owner among the Mohawk people of this 923 acre parcel. In 1837, Culbertson went to the provincial government of Upper Canada, and he said, "This is my farm, please give me a fee simple deed." And even though the government officials were well aware of the surrender process and the need for consent through an assembly or public meeting, and they knew that there had been no such assembly or public meeting, there wasn't even a suggestion of one, only this 1820 quitclaim. He got his patent, and eventually his land, I'll call it his land, the 923 acres of reserve land that we're calling the Culbertson Tract ended up in the hands of non-Mohawks. And we researched all of that, and we have all the particulars of how that land was lost. And by later on in the 19th century, there were no Mohawks on title. And again, this all happened completely contrary to the requirements, the mandatory requirements of the Simcoe deed. Next, please. So today, the Mohawks of Bay of Quinte consider the tract to still be part of the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. As your lawyer, I have tried over many years to convince governments that all they have to do is make the fee simple ownership go away by extinguishing the fee simple ownership, and your reserve ownership springs back into life automatically because it's never been extinguished. Canada and Ontario don't agree with that assessment, and we've chosen to try to negotiate it rather than taking our chances in court. So this land has been in private ownership since 1837. And as I said, of the 923 acres, roughly 500, a slight majority, are in the township of Tyendinaga, and the balance is in the town of Deseronto and is relatively heavily built upon and occupied. So next, please, is I think a summary of the steps we took. We researched, the claim was researched, I think, primarily by Trish Ray, who is still your researcher today, and Lisa Miracle and Brant Barty, the late Brant Barty, were, I think, involved. It was handed over to me in the early 1990s to write it up. In 1995, we submitted the claim to Ontario and Canada. There is always a complication in pre-1867 claims because before Confederation, the Indian affairs were generally handled by the Crown taking instructions from Westminster in England. And there was no such thing as the federal government. There was the Crown in England, and there was the Upper Canada government in Toronto. So we were concerned that Ontario and Canada might take different opinions on who's responsible. We presented it to both governments just to cover the basis. We didn't really have to worry too much because by 2003, that's 8 years, which is, really for a simple claim, which this is, really unconscionable to take 8 years to accept a claim that was really open and shut. Frankly, it was open and shut. There's no evidence whatsoever of a surrender. The government of Ontario took the position that all these things that went wrong with Indian lands before 1867 were Canada's responsibility. Canada accepted responsibility by accepting the claim, so we didn't need to have Ontario at the table. But as we will get to in a little while, we do have some dealings with Ontario in this matter. The one quirk in 2003 was that Canada's letter talked about achieving certainty in a settlement, and that the way to achieve certainty was a surrender of the Culbertson Tract. And immediately Chief and Counsel said, well, we're not doing that. We are not surrendering the Culbertson Tract to give you certainty. We had a number of meetings with federal officials, and they agreed that they were prepared to explore all alternatives to a surrender. And we continued, the council agreed to, after a year, to negotiate on the basis that they were not going to surrender any land. They shouldn't have to surrender any land in order to get their land back. It was really not reasonable or appropriate to expect that to happen. So we got to the negotiation table in 2004 after that resolution, and it turned out that even though we had some flexibility at the federal negotiating table, their position at the end of the day was they could not come up with an alternative to surrender. So their position was, you have to surrender your land, we'll give you cash, and you can buy replacement land somewhere else. And if you can buy back land in the Culbertson Tract, you can spend your cash there. But we spent a number of years in really rather fruitless negotiations trying to get around this position. So I was directed to commence an action in federal court. The minister of the day had said publicly, and the negotiators had said behind closed doors, that Canada does not buy land or to settle land claims. But their policy said at the time, still does, that where land has been taken without a valid surrender, Canada will either return the land or give you the current unimproved value of the land. And we said, there's nothing in that policy that doesn't say you can't take the appropriate steps to reacquire that land and return that land. And the federal court actually agreed with us that the minister had misstated the policy. But unfortunately, even though we won the case, the judge, who was a former lawyer for the federal government, said, well, it's not the place of the court to tell Canada what negotiation position to take, but the minister had misled the public and had misstated the content of the policy and awarded us a declaration and some hefty costs as well. So we took that as a victory. In 2016, I think we already were aware that it was possible to have partial resolutions of portions of the Culbertson Tract if we had a willing seller. If you have a willing seller, that's just Canada's policy. Land transfers have to be willing buyer, willing seller. Well, by 2016, 2017, we discovered that there might be a willing seller of the 300-acre parcel that we're now dealing with. And we launched into negotiations, and that led us to the partial settlement. Now, the next slide, I'll get into what that entails. So Mr. Terry Kimmett is the current fee simple title holder of around a third of the Culbertson Tract, 299, let's call it 300 acres. And he operates a farm there, and he had operated an aggregate quarry until 2007, as his father had done before him. Because of the Culbertson Tract claim, members of the band became aware that this was land that was under claim, that it was, in the view of the band, still part of the reserve, and members of the band occupied the quarry in protest. I'm sure many of you remember this, in protest of the use of the extraction of resources from Mohawk land, and partly because Ontario had granted quarry licenses, and those protests essentially put the quarry out of business. And so since that time, there haven't been active quarry operations. And Mr. Kimmett, actually, next slide, please. Mr. Kimmett, this is his land. This is going to be your land. So this is a satellite view of the partial settlement line. You can see on the left side of the image here where the aggregate quarry is. It's full of water. The balance of it is essentially agricultural land. You can see the boundary here between the township and the town. Next, please. So I'm going to cover this, and then I think Jordan will give me a break. So Mr. Kimmett sued Ontario in 2012 on the basis that the Ontario Provincial Police failed to protect his use and enjoyment of land from the protesters. He chose not to sue the band, which is appropriate. The band did not authorize any of these protests, and he didn't name any of the individual protesters. He simply took the position that it was the job of the provincial police to keep order and allow him to maintain his enjoyment of the quarry and so on. Between 2012 and 2017, Mr. Kimmett, Ontario, had been in discussions to see if they could settle that lawsuit. And Ontario came to the band initially saying, if we could get the land from Mr. Kimmett, could that help settle a part of the Culbertson claim? Well, it turned out the original suggestion was a little misleading because they didn't have the land. But what that led to was a rather complicated negotiation whereby Mr. Kimmett negotiated with Ontario to settle his lawsuit, and he took the position that he would be prepared to settle if he got bought out, if his land was bought out from under him because it was essentially not as valuable to him if he couldn't use it. And where would the money come from? That's when they came to the band in Canada and said, Canada can provide some of the money to purchase Kimmett. So we had four parties essentially. We were negotiating with Canada to settle our claim partially, only with respect to the 300 acres. Ontario was negotiating with Kimmett, but the four parties altogether would make different commitments, and the thing would come together so that Mr. Kimmett would be bought out. Ontario would have its lawsuits settled. The band would have a partial settlement of its land claim, and Canada would be paying out an appropriate amount of money to settle the claim. So that's how it came together. And it is rather complicated, but the outcome is quite satisfactory. So next, please. So Jordan, did you want to pick it up at this point?
Sure.
Thank you.
So as Alan had mentioned before, Canada's specific claim policy lays out how compensation for specific claims, which is what we're negotiating right now, operates. So I've highlighted the two salient items over here, which is what form the basis for our proposed settlement. So one for return of the lands, and then secondly for compensation based on the loss of use of the lands. Loss of use being the lost revenue to the band, the lost opportunity rather, to be able to get revenue on the lands since 1837 up to the present day. So before we get into a few more details about the offer that's been made by Canada, we wanted to be very clear about dispelling any possible suggestion that MBQ is being forced to buy back its own land under the compensation that's being offered. That is not what is happening. What's going to be happening is the global amount that's been offered by Canada, and you'll see a good breakdown in a second, is being added on to that loss of use compensation. So any money that's owed to MBQ for that lost opportunity is still going to be in MBQ's pocket at the end of the day. There's an additional amount that is being added by Canada, that's $2 million, to go towards the purchase of the land. And so that money is going to be forwarded to BMO Trust Company, who is then going to be purchasing the title to the land. And this land, we're going to get into the land acquisition trust in a little bit more detail down the road in this presentation. But roughly, the land acquisition trust is going to be holding on to the title of the land while the quarry gets rehabilitated. So that is putting up a berm and dewatering some of the water that's come up in the quarry, and having a slope leading down at a 45-degree angle so that it's not just a straight drop and it's safer. There's also going to be some payments made to the neighboring municipalities, if any at all. It's not necessarily going to happen for any tax losses. Again, this is an amount that's added on by Canada in addition to the loss of use. And any issues that are standing in the way of us being able to make this into reserve land are going to be dealt with as well. So the reason that this has to be held by the land acquisition trustee is because in order for it to be confirmed as reserve, one of the requirements under Canada's policy, and this was written out in a letter by the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, that the quarry had to be rehabilitated first. So Canada cannot take title to the land to add it to reserve until this is met. And that's why it has to be held onto by the land acquisition trustee in the meantime. Again, the rehabilitation, the costs that are going towards that, again, are not going to be coming out of MBQ's pocket. That is all going to be paid for by Ontario, by money that they're going to be paying into the Land Acquisition Trust, and as well from Mr. Kimmett if there's any amount over and above what Ontario is paying. None of that is going to be coming from MBQ, and it wouldn't make any sense for that to happen because MBQ never authorized the operation of this quarry. In fact, there are many letters from Chief Miracle to the province of Ontario protesting the issuance of licenses, and none of the money from those quarries ever went to MBQ. So it wouldn't make any sense for MBQ to have to pay for those anyway. So very roughly, this is an overview, and this will be touched on again later on in the presentation by Alyssa and by Douglas. The steps that are required for this land to become once again recognized as MBQ having the administration and control over the reserve. So once the land acquisition trustee buys the title to the land and is holding on to it, rehabilitation is going to take place. After that is finished, then the title is going to be transferred over to Canada. And that fee simple title is going to be extinguished as Canada then confirms the land as reserved for the use of benefit of the MBQ. So here I'm getting into the amount of money that has been offered by the federal government. The amount, as Chief Miracle said, is roughly $31 million. And this is a global amount. So this amount includes all of these items that we've listed over here. It's full payment for the loss of use for just these 300 acres. The rest of the loss of use for the remaining roughly 600 acres is going to be dealt with later on in the negotiations. And this is lasting from 1837, which is when the patent was issued to John Culbertson. Or sorry, rather, it was taken over by Canada. And and up to the present day. It has some contribution towards land repair costs, if any. So this is going to go towards any cleanup issues or environmental repairs that might be necessary, but nothing has been identified. And in fact, we do have clean environmental reports from environmental firm already. So likely that won't be required. It also includes a full payment for loan funding for negotiations. So for every year that we were in negotiations with the federal government has been funding a portion of those negotiations. It's going to include the full payment for ratification costs. So Lawrence Lewis is on the call right now. His firm was engaged to manage the ratification and the electronic voting. And so that's all being paid for by the federal government. The environmental site assessment costs, so that the clean report that I mentioned earlier, that is being paid for by the federal government as well. The tax loss compensations that I mentioned a moment ago. So these are only going to be paid out if and when there is an agreement between ourselves and Deseronto and Tyendinaga as to the amount of taxes they're going to be losing when they no longer have that piece of land as a tax base. That is being added on by Canada as well and does not come out of the loss of use for the MBQ. And then finally, fees for the land acquisition trustee. So for BMO Trust Company to hold on to the land for the period of time that it takes for the rehabilitation to be successfully finalized, and for any of the additions to reserve requirements to be met, there is going to be fees associated with that. So Canada is paying for that as well. So here is a rough breakdown of how the compensation looks. As you can see, the net total that we're estimating to be in MBQ's pocket at the end of the day is going to be $25 million. Unfortunately, we can't give a final idea of what that cost is going to be because there are costs that are not yet known. For instance, the possible payment of tax losses to the municipalities, we don't know what that's going to be yet. There are some costs associated with printing out the packages, the ratification packages to the members, and mailing costs, things like that. And so what these are right now are estimates as to what the final costs are going to be. But as you can see, the bulk of it is going to be going into MBQ's pocket at the end of the day. So as the chief mentioned earlier in his opening, the bottom line that we really want to underline to everybody on the call today is that this partial settlement is going to be returning the administration and control over these 300 acres to the MBQ once again. MBQ is not going to be bearing any costs of acquiring the land. Again, that $2 million is going to be coming from the federal government to pay Mr. Kimmett. The net value of the loss of use to MBQ at the end of the day, so the amount that's going to be in MBQ's pocket for whatever it chooses, will be in excess of $25 million. And this amount will be invested in an interest-bearing account as community consultations are ongoing to determine what to do with that money. So when the offer was made from the federal government, what Alan and I did before the offer could be presented to the membership was we wanted to make sure that it was a reasonable and fair offer for the lost opportunities that MBQ had suffered. And so we very carefully analyzed the amount by using these four different approaches. And what we did was we compared it first with other known land claim settlements. And we did this on an acre by acre basis to see roughly what Canada has paid out previously for specific claims based on what they have in their database, and looking at what the amount was per acre and compared it that way. We then also compared it looking at a one-time payment for the loss brought forward. So what that means is looking at what the the amount of money paid out for every single year, and then compounding that amount up to the present day, because a dollar back in 1837 is not worth what a dollar is today, and to see whether that amount was reasonable. We also used what's called the generic rental model, and that is that has become a standard valuation method in specific claims negotiations. What it means is oftentimes you have a piece of land and you can't ever say what would have been done with it had it been in the control of the First Nation. You can't conclusively say that it definitely would have been there would have been gold mining operations there or logging operations. And it ends up just being a conflict of opinion, and you never get to any resolution. So instead, what the generic rental model does is it assumes that every acre of land could have been rented out for a certain return in every single year. And using historical rates of return based on the historical values of the land, you can then start to interpolate what a return might have been on those pieces of property. And so looking at historical values of land in pinpoints in time, I believe we looked at 1850, 1900, and the 1950s. We had an economist go over these numbers for us, and based on those rates of return, bring forward a loss of use calculation. So we looked at it that way too. And then finally, what we did is we hired another economist over at the University of Guelph, I believe. And he was able to, we know that the land was used primarily, if not exclusively, for hay harvesting. And looking at what the value of the return on hay harvesting could have been. And since we know there was also aggregate under that land, got another expert to evaluate what the possible return would have been for the extraction of the quarry amount, or sorry, the aggregate amount from the quarry. And so looking at all of those four different approaches, we're able to conclude that this roughly 25 million was a fair amount of compensation and within the reasonable range of compensation. And we were prepared to tell Chief and Council that it should be presented to the membership, which so there was a Mohawk Council resolution that was signed on October 28th, and then the offer was presented to the membership in a notice in December of last year for ratification. So this will be the final slide that I'll speak to before we move on to Douglas and Alyssa. I spoke a moment ago about Chief Miracle sending letters to the province of Ontario to protest the issuance of aggregate licenses on this 300 acres. And even though these letters had been sent and it was in their system, they nevertheless issued 2 licenses and then an expansion on one of them. And Ontario recognized that it failed to consult the MBQ in issuing those quarry licenses. And in 2018, an offer was made by Ontario for $300,000 for failing to consult on that basis. This won't be part of the ratification vote. It doesn't require a ratification from the membership. It only requires a Mohawk Council resolution to be accepted. But we wanted to make sure that the membership knew about this additional amount of money that's going to be coming from Ontario. And I'll turn it over to Alyssa and Douglas.
Thanks, Jordan. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Alyssa Flaherty-Spence. Douglas Buckmeyer is also on the call. I'll primarily be joining the presentation regarding the Land Acquisition Trust. Our firm, Gowling WLG, Douglas and myself, and also Keisha Thompson, were hired to provide legal advice and to structure the Land Acquisition Trust. The purpose of the Land Acquisition Trust is very limited in scope. It has primarily four main roles in terms of the purpose of what this trust is to do. The first is to acquire the land to the partial settlement land that we're talking about now. Then the trust is to hold the title of this land during the quarry rehabilitation projects that are going to be happening. The trust is then to hold and pay out any land acquisition costs on this, and then also to transfer the title to Canada to be confirmed as MBQ's reserve. Next slide, please, Jordan. So again, as Jordan and Alan have already mentioned, MBQ is not buying back its own land. I think that's really important. The trust is not there to pay out and buy back the land. The purpose of the trust is to have the trustee, which is BMO Trust Company, to acquire the fee simple title to the partial settlement land and to hold that title while the quarry is being rehabilitated. And it needs to be rehabilitated to the standards required by quarry license and provincial legislation based on the needs from Canada to send it back to reserve land. Upon completion of the rehabilitation of the quarry, the partial settlement land will be confirmed as part of MBQ's reserve again. And to acquire this subject property, there's a number of steps that need to occur. The first is that the trustee, BMO Trust Company, will purchase title to the partial settlement land in fee simple from the title holder, Mr. Kimmett, using funds from governments of Canada and Ontario. As Jordan and Alan have already mentioned, these funds to purchase this land is not from MBQ. It's from the government of Ontario and Canada. The quarry then will be rehabilitated again at the cost of the government of Ontario and the current title holder in excess. The partial settlement land will be confirmed then by the government of Canada as MBQ's reserve. MBQ then will have administration and control of the subject property. Out of Canada's global settlement offer, which Jordan had previously mentioned in that display, includes cost to acquire the partial settlement land. Again, the cost is coming from Canada. The land acquisition costs will include things like the cost to acquire a title to the partial settlement land, municipal tax losses, if any, additions to reserve costs under Canada's policy, trustee fees, and property insurance. Again, these costs that will be paid by the land acquisition trustee will not come out of MBQ's loss of use compensation in the global settlement amount. So the rehabilitation of the quarry. A portion of the partial settlement lands needs to be confirmed as MBQ's reserve, includes a aggregate quarry. Prior to the partial settlement lands being confirmed as MBQ's reserve, the quarry needs to be rehabilitated. There are certain things that need to be done to that quarry. The quarry is being rehabilitated at the cost of the government of Ontario and the current title holder, not from MBQ's accounts. The trustee shall pay for the rehabilitation costs out of the trust, which will be coming from Ontario and the title holder. So once the government of Ontario provides the funds to the trustee, if there is any excess rehabilitation funds remaining after the quarry restoration, it will be divided between MBQ and the title holder. There may not be any excess funds, but if there is from the government of Ontario, it will be split between MBQ and the title holder. If there the quarry needs to have more funds to rehabilitate the quarry, then any excess funds will be from the current title holder. They will be held in an escrow account to pay for any rehabilitation costs over and above the funds provided from Ontario. Any remaining escrow funds will be then returned back to the title holder after rehabilitation. After rehabilitation, then the land will be confirmed as part of MBQ's reserve, and all other ATR requirements are met. And what that means is the additions to reserve requirements under Canada's policy. The trustee then will transfer title to the partial settlement lands to Canada. Canada then will confirm the land as reserved for MBQ for the benefit of MBQ. The land acquisition trust will then terminate and close. So the trust will be in effect for only a short period of time. As you can see, the scope and the need of this trust is very, very limited. It has a short period of time in which it will be operating. The trust will terminate 90 days after the partial settlement land has been confirmed as reserved by ministerial order through Canada's additions to reserve policy.
It's Alan. I'll pick it up. Oh, I'm sorry. You
Yeah,
done,
no,
Alyssa?
Yes.
If you're not done, I'll shut up.
No, go ahead, Alan.
Okay. So thank you both, Jordan and Alyssa. The trust, the whole notion of the trust is to make sure Canada, we would have preferred that Canada buy the land from Mr. Kemet, but they declined to do that. And the trust is a useful tool to create an interim process of landholding to have the rehabilitation taken care of, and for no other purpose. So now there will be, after there's a vote on this, and we're hoping that it will be positive, there will be heavy equipment on the land to rehabilitate the quarry, not at the band's expense, but at the expense of Ontario and Mr. Kemet. And we are going to be reaching out to all of the members to not overreact when they see that, not to see that as some kind of interference with the band's property rights, but in fact, a necessary step to getting this land back under the administration and control of the band. And any interference with that work will only delay and frustrate our plan to get the land back. So that is, I don't think that's going to happen, but there has been a bit of a pattern of whenever something happens on the land, it is seen as a cause to protest. But in this case, it is a necessary part of getting the land back, and we're hoping that all the members will respect that. Okay, next, please. So the compensation balance, that's what we're calling the amount that comes back, the net amount that comes back to MBQ, which ought to be, we're using 25 million, but that's frankly a conservative number. It should be substantially more than that. We're using a conservative number just in case we run into overruns, and we don't want to mislead anybody. We do expect it to be a greater amount than that. So within 45 days, this is of a successful ratification, and that means a ratification by the membership of the MBQ plus signing by the Chief and Council and by Canada. Canada will pay the loss of use compensation into an interest-bearing account with BMO Nesbitt Burns, who will be speaking shortly. And the land acquisition costs will be paid directly to the land acquisition trustee. It'll be an estimate, as Jordan and I think Alyssa have mentioned, because we can't foresee every last penny of what those costs will be, but we're going to make sure there's enough money in the hands of the trustee to cover those expenses, and if it's more than enough, it'll come back. So the question that always comes up is, will Canada have any say in what the band has to do has to do with the compensation? And the answer is no. The settlement agreement simply requires the Chief and Council to say that the compensation will be used for the benefit of the MBQ. And how they choose to do that will be up to them in consultation with the membership. Canada has no say over how you use the net compensation balance. Next, please. So unfortunately, COVID has been a complicating factor in our lives for the last year and a half, and it simply hasn't been possible to have the in-person consultations to come up with a plan for how to use the money that is coming to the band. That will be coming up when the conditions permit. And my understanding, the Chief and Council they should be the ones to speak to their plans for this. But my understanding is that they plan to engage community members in how to best take advantage of this compensation amount. First, we have to get the agreement ratified to secure the money and to get the process of restoring the land in motion. Next, please. So the compensation balance what does it represent? It represents a collective loss to all of the generations of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte since 1837. So this 300 acres was not lost only to the people who are alive today, but all of the people who are alive since 1837 and the future members. So it's a collective asset, and it should be used in a way that benefits all members equally. It isn't really the property of the individuals who comprise the band today. But having said that, it's really up to the band, the Chief and Council and the membership to make these decisions together on what is the best use to benefit the band as a whole. And that will be done in a process that is coming up after the vote. Next, please. So this is BMO Wealth Management. I'll turn it over to Mark MacDonald. And if Mark wants to introduce Steve Partridge, that might be a good idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Mark MacDonald, and I'm a portfolio manager with BMO Nesbitt Burns. We've been managing money, or Nesbitt Burns and BMO Asset Management has been managing money for the Mohawks for the Bay of Quinte since February 1st, 2001. And in the event that the money is invested long term, probably the easiest thing to do is to say, okay, how are we managing the money now, and make investment recommendations based on how we're doing it now, and look forward what kind of typical returns would be based on historical returns. So what we do is when you look at this, we manage two different portfolios for the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. One is an equity portfolio and one is a fixed income portfolio. Both of those portfolios are set up to be really conservative in nature. And then what we do is we consolidate those two portfolios. And when we consolidate the two portfolios, the equity weighting will be anywhere between 25 and 30%. Again, conservative in nature. And those equities are well diversified geographically and by industry, and they'll be typically made up of large blue chip equities. And then you would look at your fixed income / cash allocation if you're thinking long-term investment for the money. And that would typically, our recommendation to invest that is between 70 and 75% in fixed income and government bonds and corporate bonds. Again, that's considered to be pretty conservative in nature and would be the same asset mix / risk tolerance recommendation for any Culbertson Tract partial settlement funds invested for the long term. I'm going to get you to, Jordan, I'm going to get you to move to the next slide so we can just look at some of the historical returns of how this type of asset mix or risk tolerance has done since February 1st, 2001. Although it's not going to be perfect and you can't always base historical return or future returns on historical returns, it does give you an idea of what historical markets have returned. So if you look, when you consolidate the fixed income and the equity portfolio, you can see that over the last year, it's up 3.08%. Over the last 5 years, 4.09%. And since inception, or February 1st, 2001, the portfolio's returned 4.5%. Now, I think it's fair to say that given current economic conditions, current interest rates, and a recommended asset mix of 25 to 30% in equities, a 3 to 4% return for the funds is probably a fair goal over normal market conditions in an economic cycle. Now, the idea is always, if you're going to be investing your money long term in stocks and bonds and cash, is it going to outpace inflation? Is it going to outpace what you can get paid on cash, which is the most conservative type investment you can have? If you look at what the rate of interest on capital and revenue accounts from the government of Canada, or what they pay on their cash, that's currently at 0.396%. So that was the idea, is saying, okay, if the money is going to be invested long term, what kind of returns can you expect, or should you expect over the long term, and is it going to outpace cash? And we believe if it's done conservatively, and if it's done with diversification across industries and countries, you can absolutely do that in the long run. And I'd get you go to the next slide, and that's it for me. Those are just disclaimers. And then I'm going to introduce Steve. Steve Partridge works for our trust department. And Steve, do you have some words that you want to go over and chat about where you fit into all of this?
Thank you, Jordan. I was muted there and I didn't think I was going to be able to speak. So thank you, Mark. Yeah, my name's Steve Partridge. I work for BMO Trust Company. We are going to be acting as the corporate trustee of the Land Acquisition Trust. Alyssa's run through really the structure of the trust and the limited role that we're really going to have in the whole global settlement. It will probably be involved here for a year and a half to 2 years, really just holding the land until it can be mediated and cleaned up and turned over to MBQ. I did want to just introduce myself and say hi to everybody. And if there are questions that come up around the trust, I'm here to help and answer anything. Thank you.
Okay, I will pick it up again here. Overall, there's a recommendation here to recommend this settlement. It confirms the lands as reserve and restores the administration and control to the band. It's not a big piece of land, but it is very significant because it is the first settlement, certainly in my time, that we have successfully managed to negotiate to begin the process of restoring your Mohawk Tract. Your Mohawk Tract has been cut down by surrenders. By 1836, I think 2/3 of the Mohawk Tract was gone through surrenders, and we're trying to deal with all of these historic surrenders to identify problems that were implicit in the surrender process, and to use that to restore your land base. So this is a small, well, it's like what Neil Armstrong said, it's a small step for man, but it's an important one. It provides a fair amount, and I would use the word generous for a 300-acre parcel. The amount of money that we've been offered is actually on the very high end for this type of rural land. It is quite a good number, a very good number, frankly, and of course it preserves your right to pursue the balance of the Culbertson Tract negotiations or any other claims. We have, for example, another claim in the works now involving loss of use for the 200 acres of the Turton Pen lease as well. So there is nothing to be said against this proposal, in my view. It achieves two important objectives. That probably the more important one is getting the land back. The second one is getting a fair amount of compensation for the deprivation of the land over the last many decades. Next, please. So before I turn it over to Lawrence to talk about the voting process, the process of ratifying this agreement has begun, as you know. August the 10th, Lawrence of One Feather supervised the mailing out of information packages. We are holding 6 community engagement meetings between today and September the 21st, which is just a couple of days before the vote itself. We would like to reach everybody. We would like this information to be available to everybody. We're going to Lawrence will talk, I think, a little bit about what is posted on his firm's website and how to access that information. We still have very serious challenges created by COVID in terms of not being able to gather the many hundreds of people into a room that we'd like to be able to convey this information. So we're going to have to rely on the old moccasin telegraph or its modern version, which is YouTube and Facebook, to get the word out and for people to understand how important it is to turn out and vote on this important matter. Next. So I'll let Lawrence now take over. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. My name is Lawrence Lewis. I'm the CEO and founder of One Feather. I'm a Wee Kay Nation member here on the west coast of British Columbia. My First Nation is the Wee Kay Nation. And I've had the good fortune and pleasure of working with First Nations my whole career and various levels of government. As indicated, I'm the founder and CEO of One Feather, and we are the leading Indigenous voting solution provider for First Nations across the country. We currently work with over 200 nations, providing a variety of services, but core, I think, front and center for members of the Mohawk of the Bay of Quinte is voting events. Last year, we conducted over 100 voting events and had over 40,000 electronic ballots cast through a variety, every time a vote you can think of. So, ratification votes, settlement votes with Canada, chief and council elections, so on and so forth. And we've been in this business. I've been in this business now for almost 22 years. And I'm a certified electoral officer with Canada, and of course, really focus in on making sure that the services we provide are delivered through a First Nations lens and perspective, and our shared lived experience, so that your experience using our voting processes are familiar, easy to navigate and use, and at the same time ensuring that anything that happens inside of that digital space has a strong and very secure data architecture, and your own personal digital identity protection and security as part of our platform. And I'm happy to get into a very detailed conversation about that with any members who want to learn more about that. You can contact me directly through the notices we put out through our website, and certainly through any of the accessing onefeather.ca specifically. We're very fortunate to be here working with your nation and invited back to the community again. We have provided voting services for the nation in the past. Very honored and privileged and thankful to be back here to support this event. As indicated, the ratification vote information and notice packages have been sent out. Those have all gone out by snail mail, by postage. They are big packages. And while we sent them out at the beginning of August, some of them may not get to folks for some time, depending on your postal code and where you may be. And if you have not received your information package yet, and you have not, and you haven't done, certainly before the end of the month, make sure you contact us to let us know, and we will get a replacement package out to you or get a package out to you. We are getting some packages back returned as undeliverable, So some folks may not be getting this information. If you do want the physical package, make sure you let us know. Use the support button or the help button or any of the email or contact numbers provided on our notices. There's no charge to contact us. So whether you're contacting us online or by phone or by email or text message, no charge for that. So make sure you let us know if you're missing any information, and we'll get that out to you right away. We can also provide you with some secure digital links to access that information if you need to as well. So those information packages have all gone out. We have also already sent out the voting packages. So all the voting packages have gone out and so that you can vote by mail. And as the slide indicates, you can vote in person, by mail, or electronically. Of course, you can only cast one ballot, and that ballot first past the post is the one that's counted. So for example, if you vote electronically during that period, you obviously can't vote by mail or you can't vote in person. So you only get to cast one ballot. But those voting packages have gone out as well, and those should be arriving in mailboxes. Some folks may have already received them, but certainly over the next week or so, the balance of those should be arriving in folks' mailbox. Again, and this is, to anyone who's on the call today, particularly leadership and staff, if you're aware of any members who have not received any information, please have them contact us directly, and we will personally deal with their needs and get them the information that they require. It's important that we verify your identity and your eligibility. So having someone request on your behalf is a whole bunch of extra steps. Much faster if that voter contacts us directly. We can vet and clear your eligibility and get your package out usually the same day. Again, all that contact information is available free of charge to get a hold of us at any point in time. Of course, we are on the West Coast, so if you're phoning us at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock your local time, maybe an hour or so before we get back to you. So just note that the time dip that's there, but we will in most cases get information out to you the same day if we need to. So next slide, please.
And Lawrence, just a question here from April. And you can answer that right now. I think it touches on what you're discussing right now.
Yeah, so if you have not received your package, please let us know, because first thing is we're going to confirm that we have correct contact information for you, or we don't. So we'll verify that, and we will send you a hard copy in the mail of the information package, and then provide a secure link if required to access those documents digitally. Those digital links expire though, so they're not permanent. So the best thing for us to do is do two things: get you that information hard copy in the mail as quickly as possible, and then if you need to access that information digitally as well.
I think, Lawrence, it's Alan. I think April's question was, how does she get access to a PDF electronically? And yeah, I think that information will be on your website, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, they need to contact us directly. We need to verify their eligibility to get the information. Then we will provide them with the links and access. Right. Yeah. It's not just simply out there for the world to access. So we do need to verify and authenticate that. So that requires us to have a direct conversation with the elector and verify identity. Great. Yeah, so again, mail-in ballots have been sent. Just for folks, just to clarify that those mail-in ballots must be received by me, the electoral officer, certainly before the close of the poll on the 25th, but the 24th is the last mail delivery day. So if you are dropping that voting package in the mail, it needs to get to me before the at the end of the day on the 24th. You can though, however, if you're dropping a voting package off, you can drop it off to me at the polling station in person. But keep in mind that the last mail delivery date is September 24th. And so you need to make sure you have time in that space and place to get that document in the mail and return to us. The voting packages are all sent out with prepaid postage that are coded and stamped with our return information. That will accelerate the return process to us. So don't put them in a separate envelope. Use the materials we provided to return that. And when you do get the voting package, don't hesitate. Get it completed and back in the mail as quickly as you can. If you choose to vote that way. Electronic voting will be open September 5th to September 25th as per the slide, and you'll be able to access that through the One Feather link, either directly through our landing page or at the page dedicated for the Mohawk of the Bay of Quinte, all of that information is on the notice. When you do vote electronically, we do go through an identity verification or identity authentication process. So we will ask you to provide, you'll be asked to provide your status number, your date of birth, and a personal email address, and we'll verify that your information against our database. And then you'll have to confirm or verify that the email address that you're using is a good one. And we call that a two-factor verification or identification process. And it'll be something you may be familiar with if you have a Google account or a Facebook, or you've used Amazon or something like that to have your identity verified online. When the voting event opens, we'll add an actual third verification factor, which is a PIN that's unique to you and this voting event and your identification. That PIN is only useful to you. It can't be used by anybody else, and it has to be used in conjunction with the other verification factors that we have in place. And so while that PIN is secure, it's a secure element that adds some verification. Again, that PIN is not useful to anybody but yourself as the voter. And so that PIN will be, you'll require that PIN to vote. During any of that electronic voting process on our platform, there are links and buttons for support. And you can contact us if you need any type of assistance. Our system tracks all activity on the platform, so we'll be able to assess any challenges you're having as a voter and walk you through that process. The most typical reasons for a voter being challenged in our system is that some of the data we have on file is not accurate. So for example, we may have incorrect status number for you, or we may have an incorrect date of birth, not because anyone has done anything wrong, it's just that sometimes there's an error in data. So for example, say you're born on March 3rd, but it was entered in the system by accident as being born February, say you're born March 2nd and it's entered in the system as being born February 3rd. So sometimes those dates get inverted. For the most part, though, data is really good. And the average person from first-time user to completing a first-time vote is less than 3 minutes. And so that's based on hundreds of thousands of votes, 300,000, over 300,000, in fact, since 2015. So we're always working to enhance that system from a voter experience perspective, but also continue to enhance from a security perspective. Again, if you have any needs of support whatsoever as a voter, please do not hesitate to contact us directly through the toll-free number, the email address, the online support functionality. Contact us directly and we'll be able to work with you very, very quickly to resolve any challenges you may have. One Feather is, while it is based out of Victoria, we are a staff of almost 20 folks, 3 of which are dedicated to supporting voters like yourself to be successful in your voting event. And we have access to all the necessary information to help you be successful. So again, if you're having any issues, please don't hesitate to contact us directly and our support team will look after you. Finally, you'll be able to vote in person at the Quinte Mohawk School on September 25th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. When you do come to that polling station, do please bring a piece of identification with you. Remember, we are guests in your community, and so we don't know everybody. So to help us speed up the process in terms of getting you voted and in and out as quickly as possible, please bring a piece of ID with you. If you are a voter who does not have ID, that you should still come to the polling station and vote in person. We have other mechanisms to verify and authenticate your identification. So if you don't have ID, please do come to the polling station. If you do have ID, please bring it with you to help speed up the process. Every eligible voter will be given the opportunity to participate and vote. I'm going to pause there. And of course, again, I just cannot emphasize enough, voters who need support, please do contact us through the multiple media to do so, and we'll look after you. Thank you.
Okay, this is, we're getting close to the end and probably a break before we go to questions or any closing comments by Chief and Council. But the ratification threshold that Canada requires here, it's not a majority of a majority, which would be the case if we were dealing with a surrender or designation under the Indian Act. It's not as high as that. But we do need 25% plus one of all of the eligible voters to vote in favor of these two agreements, the partial settlement agreement, the land acquisition trust agreement. If you've seen your packages, you've seen that there is a single ballot question. You're being asked to approve the two agreements that go together. There's no point in voting for the settlement agreement, but not the trust agreement. They're a package. And so there's only one box for and one box against. So I'll have to unpack this a little bit because it's a bit complicated. Let's say you have 1,000 members. You have many, many more members than that, many thousands. But let's use the number of 1,000. So we need 1,001. No, we need 251, which is 25% plus one. I'm getting my simplified example all wrong. 25% plus one is 251 to say yes. And that number must be the majority of those who vote. So let's say you get 501 people voting. In that case, the 251 would not be enough, because even though you've got the 25% plus one, they would not be a majority. Actually, maybe I got my numbers wrong, but let's say 505 voted, but only 251 said yes. So you needed it both to be a majority of those who vote and an overall 251 of the eligible voters have to say yes. So it's a substantial threshold. In the past, my understanding is that elections for chief and council don't always result in that kind of turnout. You have a very large number of members who do not live in the territory, who are all over the place, in fact. And so it is a challenge. We can't take it for granted that we're going to get a quarter plus one of your eligible voters in favor. So it is going to be a challenge, especially in a COVID situation, to get the word out and to reach people. So that is kind of the last, I believe, Jordan, next slide. That's really the last thing I have to say. Oh no, this is back to Lawrence. The previous slide, Jordan, 43. So this was, I think Lawrence covered this, but if there's anything you want to add, Lawrence, on this, that was slightly out of order. But
it's all good. It's all good. Thanks. I think just to kind of feed off of your comments, in order for this vote to be successful and meet the thresholds that are required, it's just really important that members communicate and share, of course, the voting event details and how to access information, and all that information is how to get access to it, and the information you need to be able to vote successfully is located at that link button, bullet number 1. That link is prominently displayed on any notices or communications we put out, so it's there. Going through the electronic sign-up process to actually vote electronically is really quick. There'll be a big red button that says sign up or vote here with One Feather. You will need a personal email address, and you'll get to set your own password for your account. And then you'll have to, of course, identify yourself as a voter of MBQ, and then obviously in terms of verification of your eligibility to participate in this ballot vote, put your status number and your date of birth. And as I've indicated, that PIN will be provided to you so that you can actually cast your ballot. You will be asked to confirm your ballot selection. So there's a whole bunch of redundancy in our system to make sure that you don't accidentally cast a ballot by mistake. You'll be able to mark your ballot, and then you'll be asked very clearly that this is your choice, yes or no. And then so it's basically a double confirmation that you're making the choice that you want to make. But once that ballot is cast, it basically goes in an electronic ballot box, and it can't be undone. And in fact, we won't be able to identify your ballot with you as an individual. Just like in a traditional ballot box where the ballot goes in and there's no way for us to identify, to put that, attach a particular ballot to a particular voter. And so our systems are designed that way to ensure that voter anonymity and the ballots you cast are totally anonymous, and that you can cast your ballot in confidence knowing that it is done so in secret. We do have full, I should just add, we do have full audit provisions in our electronic system. And as I've indicated, everything in our system is digitally tracked, a digital footprint, for example. And what we create is an audit log of the transactions, of all transactions, and basically a vote log at the end, which basically tracks all aspects of the electronic voting component, with the exception, of course, of attaching a particular ballot to a voter. We do timestamp that you did vote and click your time and place, and we drill right down, or we can drill right down to the IP address of the device you're using and the Wi-Fi system you connected through, and wherever you may be on the planet at that time. So a very, very sophisticated array of security and protection measures in there to ensure that electronic ballots are in fact results that through OneFeather are results that are in fact accepted by Canada. And some of those audit and log processes have been developed in consultation with Canada to ensure that they meet their audit threshold for a secure voting process. Again, I'm going to re-say it one more time. If you need any help whatsoever, please do not hesitate to contact us at the toll-free or cost-free mechanisms to do so. Toll-free number, email address, phone number, and those support buttons on OneFeather. We're here to work with you and community to make sure that your vote is successful and that you as a voter have a successful experience voting. That's what we're here to do. So don't hesitate to reach out to us for support if you need any whatsoever. Thank you again, Alan.
Thank you. We'll swap those two slides for the next time. So I'm going to not sum up. I'm going to ask the chief and members of council if they have any final comments. You've heard our recommendation as professional advisors. I'm going to invite chief and council to do the last sum up, and then we'll decide whether we need a break or move right into questions. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Chief.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all the presenters. I think most of the material that needs to be given has been shared quite adequately. The only thing I can say is these negotiations have been long and protracted, and we had a very difficult time to move the government away from the idea of a cash settlement and surrender. Those discussions were not easy, and I'm happy to see that we're getting both. We were very, very adamant all during the discussions. We had no mandate whatsoever to surrender any land, that the goal of our community was to have our land base restored. And that was the reason why we were there. And the reason why we have a trust is because the council did not want to be seen buying back our land that we had, that our people had never surrendered in the first place. We've always taken the position that that was our land in the absence of any surrender. And so anyway, the mechanism that has just been outlined is Canada's process to achieve the goal of getting our land back. And unfortunately, we can't determine what their process is, but that's the process that's available to us at the moment. So I hope that the other thing is that if it went to court, the outcome is very, very uncertain. Alan did mention another claim where it was similar to this one at Sarnia, the Sarnia case, and they didn't get their land back. So this was a way that we could ensure getting our land back and having a very good cash settlement for the loss of use. And so I hope that our members will vote in favor of it. Our council supports it unanimously. And Kelly Miracle, one of our councillors, had to resign from council on July the 2nd because of her health. She came down with cancer and is undergoing cancer treatment, so she wasn't well enough to continue, but she did support this settlement package as well. So I'll turn it back to Alan then for questions.
Yeah, Chief, do you want to give people a break, or should we just carry on?
Well, I see we have 20 participants on the line, and I believe that 17 of them are our team, so we have 3 members. I would take it from what I see here. Is that correct? Or is there 20 additional participants in addition to
no,
the people?
No, I think that's the total, Chief.
Okay.
So sure, if April's
We-
putting her thumbs
well,
up.
Well, why don't we take a 5-minute break then, and then come back?
Sure, thank you.
Alan, what I'm going to do when we return is I'm just going to unmute everybody since we only have the 3 members, and we'll just kind of go from there, if that's okay.
That's great.
Okay.
Thanks, Florence.
Mhm.
So Alan, I've given everyone the ability to unmute themselves, and then I've asked everyone to unmute themselves. So everyone has free reign
Okay.
there. And until otherwise
All right.
indicated, I will leave it that way. I did see there's another question in the chat column there, though, if you want to revisit the answer to that question.
Okay, so there's a question. Am I saying this properly? Candice? Candice, okay. Will this be a majority vote or a percentile vote based on the number of eligible voters? Yeah, it's confusing, Candice. Let's say we actually know real numbers where we have close to 8,000 eligible voters, I believe 7,900, but let's say 8,000. That means we need to get at least 2,001 votes in favor. And that number must be the majority of those who vote. So we'll be praying to get as many out as possible. But if we have less than 30% of the eligible voters voting, then almost all of them are going to have to be voting yes for it to pass. So it's a combination of a percentage and the overall number. So it's a system that Canada came up with when they realized that for claims that are not in the hundreds of millions, where they tend to look for a higher percentage, this one at 30 million is within the range where they think if they get a quarter plus one of the voters saying yes, and that represents a majority of those who are voting, then they accept that result as the will of the band.
I have a question. So basically, this entire ordeal is we're voting to move forward with what we can move forward with, literally utilizing the government of Canada's ability to do retroactive pay, not only for the land that was in use during the time that it was no longer considered territory. The alternative is that we choose to not vote for that, and then we do not move forward with getting land back.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd put it exactly that way. I mean, this partial settlement is possible because we have the combination of factors. We have a fellow who's on title.
Right.
He's willing to make that land available. we have two governments willing to pony up the cash to buy him out, and all the different combinations of factors. Yeah.
And so if people choose to not move forward with this vote, they're literally saying, forget getting retroactive money back for land
Yeah.
that it seems like a no-brainer to me. The idea that
Yeah.
the money will be held in escrow is only a third party that ends up going into the trust that manages the property while we're waiting for things to get going. I don't have many questions about this. It looks like an opportunity for, while the money is in trust and while there is some opportunity for Nesbitt to grow upon that, to potentially use that money to buy back properties around the Culbert Tract. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the money, but I'm saying that that's a step towards the future. I think that this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Alan, just to clarify,
Go ahead,
April,
Chief.
this information we're presenting today, it just applies to the 299.43 acres, and we'll have the same kind of discussion for the balance of the Culbertson claim and any other claims that we will be negotiating for whoever the council is hopefully at the time will be negotiating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're settling what we can at the moment, and we're making sure that your future interests are protected, that this won't be used against the band in any future discussion to say that, you know, whatever people fear. There's also a clause in the settlement agreement that it doesn't affect your ability to access programs and services and that kind of thing. So there's a fair bit of detail in the settlement agreement and in the trust agreement to deal with technicalities. But for purpose of this presentation, we're giving you an overview. And if people read the documents that you already have and have questions, you're certainly free to call me, and my numbers. I did set up a couple of, I think we set them up too early, that a couple of sessions for people to call in, and I made sure I was at my phone, but you're certainly free to call me, collect at any time. And I can't promise to be at the other end of the line, but if I am, I'll certainly answer questions. I think what I may do is set up some other times so that now that people are getting the packages and may have had a chance to formulate some questions, they can call and get answers to the questions, or send them to me by email. I hope my email is
in the number in the chat for you.
Yeah, so you can. The best way to get hold of me, honestly, is by email, and I will promise to call back if you have a question. Thank you.
I'm going to make a suggestion that at some point during your presentation, if there are other members that choose to attend, that it would be very wise to explain that there is what they're voting for. Like people will have the information. I've read through it. It's very straightforward. Others may choose not to. However, people need to understand that if they vote for this is not an opportunity to try to get more for what's already available necessarily, as it is an opportunity to close a land deal in the now versus not closing a land deal in the now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's right. And I think, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you.
But making it very straightforward about what they're voting for.
Now, let me add something. If we only reach 3 members in each of our 6 sessions, then we've got something like 7,800 members that we're not reaching. And that's a bit of a concern.
Well, that might be true. I come from a large family. I have 31 first cousins. Most of them are on the territory. Of anybody I speak with, it will be very much understood what we're voting for. And I'm sure that other members that are attending today also have, their own social group and family that they communicate with. So reaching one is sometimes reaching a lot more than you realize.
Yeah,
I think well, speaking of the Moccasin Telegraph, I think police is going to be putting something on Facebook, which is for a lot of people anyway, the Moccasin Telegraph of the day, and that may be a way of getting more of the word out. Thank you.
So April, if you could just encourage all of your contacts that are members of the van, 18 years old, make sure that Lisa and Lawrence have their accurate, up-to-date addresses and email addresses. And, you know, if they want it sent to them electronically, if they indicate that to them and just communicate, and they'll get the information. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, I'll do my very best. This is an important opportunity at this day and age to be able to start changing what should have been changed a long time ago. And it's a great start.
Yeah.
This is how we get started.
Yeah, I can tell you, I was part of the Culbertson settlement agreement and the negotiations that took place there, and it took 17 years for Canada to buy up all of that land in that 200 acres because there were so many people to deal with, but it took 17 years. And on the Turton lease area, and it took time, but we did get our control of our land. And so now we just have the loss of use part to settle for that claim.
Which is brilliant. I think that's what's going to change.
So thank you very much for your support, April, and if you advocate to all your friends and family to support it, that would be very much appreciated.
You got it.
Thank you. Yeah, go. Do we know how, Lawrence, do you know who the other band members are that are on the call?
No, someone would need to point that out to me, but they can unmute themselves and ask questions if they wish to.
Okay.
David Brandt on the chat said he had to go at 3:10, so he was on, and Candace and April.
Okay.
And you will have a video recording that you can share through your nation channels as well. So by the end, you'll have an inventory of them, so you should be able to get them out pretty easily. Yeah.
So if any of the members need any clarity or have any questions, now is your opportunity to ask for questions or comments.
Well, you'll have 5 more opportunities, actually. So
5 more. This is one of the opportunities.
if you want. Yes, that's right.
Thank you guys for taking the time to host this.
Thank you, April, for joining.
Okay. Thank you,
Candace, and thank you, David, and all of our team.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, maybe Chief, you can close with a prayer, and we can go about our day.
Post the additional dates for the next calls up there so they can take a note of it.
I can personally say that I only just received my package.
Okay. That's
a few days ago, but I didn't know about it until last night. So
okay. So that's about almost 2 weeks since it was mailed out, I guess.
April, don't feel bad. Ours went to the neighbors, but the neighbors knew who everybody was and brought them to us. So in our laneway, they had all of the houses all mixed up, but Lisa has the correct addresses to correct the addresses. But we all got our packages.
Well,
and delivered them.
Lawrence and I were involved in another vote not too long ago where the Canada Post managed to lose 500 packages, right?
Wow.
Yes.
Well, anyway, so if we gather our hearts and minds together once again to give thanks to the Creator for the opportunity to be healthy and well, to present information to our community members, so they have information to vote on the restoration of our land and compensation for the 180 years that we didn't have the use of our land illegally. And we thank the Creator for this opportunity, and we ask him to always to watch over us and protect us and help us in the work that we do for our members and for our families. We ask him to continue to bless us with all good things and to give us the gift of knowledge and the lens to look into the future, knowing that our people will need more land as our community grows. And we ask you to heal all those in our community who are sick, all those who have recently lost their loved ones. And today we remember the Whalen family and the Brandt family who lost Katie, and 33 years old, in a tragic fire early on Saturday morning. We ask that Spirit wrapped, the Creator wrapped them with His love and His comfort, and that the community will step up to help where the help is needed. And for all those who also recently lost their loved ones, we pray for the comforting spirit of the Creator would be with them also, and all those who are sick. And for this time that we've had together, we give our thanks to the Creator. Yawangoa.
Right.
Everyone have a good afternoon, and
Yes.
we'll be on the line, I think it's tomorrow. Is it tomorrow, Alan, or what's the next
I
day?
don't think Ted is waving. Are you waving goodbye, Ted, or are you?
Yep. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Let me just double check. Let me just.
The next
I
meeting
don't
that
think
we have
it's
is on September 7th.
September
September-
7th. That's what I thought. Yeah.
That's our next date, September the 7th.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
One
right.
way to go.
Agenda that I circulated yesterday.
Okay, I
We
got it.
have.
All right, okay.
Thank
thanks.
you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Onigiwahe.
Bye.
Don't
Bye-bye.
say goodbye, say onigiwahe.
Onigiwahe.
Ready? Onigiwahe.
Onigiwahe, chief.
Ona.
Onigiwahe.
Yeah, Tesla. Thank you.